So this video was definitely very different than the previous two videos that I've already had posted on this channel, but I had a lot of fun filming it and narrating this story and kind of dabbling into the more spooky aspect of YouTube. I really enjoy listening to video narration like Mr. Ballin, Mr. Nightmare, Nexpo, Nick Crowley, Lazy Masquerade, and just a whole bunch of other YouTubers who have already done this. So if you guys like this story and you want to hear more in the future, give me a thumbs up and maybe even hit subscribe so that you're notified whenever I post another video. And if you want your story to be featured in the next video, send it to me on Instagram through a DM and I just might narrate it for you. If you want it to be anonymous, make sure you let me know ahead of time so that I don't make the mistake of giving you a shout out. So yeah, let's get into the story. This story was sent in to me by an anonymous user, so the names have been changed for privacy reasons. It was my sophomore year at university. I had taken a part-time job in a small family-owned flower shop 2 blocks down from the main campus. This worked perfectly for my schedule because my last class in the front hall ended 20 minutes before I had to be at work. I would get out of class and walk down to the flower shop 4 days a week. The owner and her husband, Meg and Tony, were such a sweet couple. They had retired from teaching at the university and opened the shop more as a hobby than anything. We became very close during the first several months that I worked there. I was far from home, and these two kind people in their late 50s felt like a second set of parents to me. Meg would bring me snacks and drinks so that I wouldn't get too hungry after class. She also kept extra sweaters on the little hooks by the flower cooler so that I wouldn't get too cold while making the arrangements for the customers. She was sweet and motherly in every way. Tony was a fatherly gentleman who had a clean-shaven face and was on the shorter side, standing at about 5 feet 6 inches. Any time we received a package from UPS that weighed more than 10 pounds, Tony insisted that he would carry it. He also always told me that if a customer ever made me feel uncomfortable or unsafe, to come and get himself or Meg so that I wouldn't be alone with that customer. My first semester went wonderfully. There were only 2 customers that were anything but pleasant, and they were just mildly grumpy at worst. About 6 weeks into my second semester, I noticed a tall, dark-haired man in his mid-20s had started coming to our shop pretty regularly. He would come in on either a Thursday or a Friday and purchase a single white rose. He never said much during the transactions. He would always just walk to the display cooler where we kept the single roses, spend 10 minutes or so inspecting each one, select one, and place it gently on the counter. I would ask him if that would be all, and he would nod once, pay, collect the rose, and then be on his way. He never said or did anything particularly off-putting, but I started to get an uneasy feeling when he would come in. It was like my body would react to something that my mind just couldn't see. About the 5th time that he came into the shop, he did his usual routine, but maintained eye contact for an uncomfortable amount of time when paying. He didn't say anything. He just stared into my eyes like he was trying to read my mind. I tried not to look flustered when I handed him his change. He just turned and left the shop. This was such a small, insignificant interaction, but it left me rattled for days. I found myself dreading to go to work on Thursdays and Fridays. I kept telling myself it was silly, and that he was just a strange guy. Why was this getting under my skin so badly? Meg and Tony started to notice my change in demeanor toward the end of the work week. Meg asked me if everything was okay. I told her things were fine, and that I just had a lot of school stuff on my mind. I didn't think there was any point in telling her about the quiet guy, because truthfully, he hadn't done anything. I couldn't exactly tell her I just had a bad feeling about someone based on nothing. The next week, Thursday came and went, and the quiet guy didn't show. Friday came and went, no quiet guy. I breathed a small sigh of relief when closing the shop that Friday evening. Maybe he had changed his routine, and I wouldn't have to feel so strange at work anymore. The next week went the same. No quiet guy. At this point, I started to put him out of my mind. Summer classes would start soon, and my schedule at the shop would change to Mondays and Saturdays only, until the fall semester. 3 weeks into my new schedule, I came in on a Saturday and found an envelope on the counter with my name written on the front. I asked Meg what it was, and she said she didn't know, but it had been put through the mail slot after hours the night before, and she had found it when she opened. I opened the envelope to find a single Polaroid picture of me standing at the counter of the flower shop, taken through the front window. There was nothing written on the picture, and no note. I felt sick in my stomach. My ears were ringing and my hands were shaking. Finally, Meg's concerned voice broke through my thoughts, and I heard her asking me if I was okay. I couldn't speak. I just let her take the photo out of my hands. She looked at the picture for a long minute, and then she looked up at me. "Who would do this?" she asked me. I replied that I had no idea. She asked me if any of my friends might try to play a joke on me, but even as she asked, I could tell she didn't think that was the case. None of my friends were the type to do anything of the sort, and I just couldn't shake the creepy feeling the picture gave me. Meg and I went about our workday. There were no security cameras around the shop, so there was no way to see who had left the picture. Tony arranged to have a camera installed, but it would be 2 weeks before the security company could get to it. I spent the next week obsessing over who could have left the photo. I lost sleep and became paranoid of every little noise. I know it was just a picture, but whoever took it did so without my knowledge or my permission, and wanted to make sure I knew they had. I felt as though someone were watching my every move. The next Saturday I came into the shop to find Meg standing at the counter, looking perplexed and holding an identical envelope to the one that had contained the photo. She was on the phone and talking quickly and quietly. She ended the call before I could make sense of who she was talking to. I asked her what was going on, and she told me to sit down for a moment and she would let me know. I had a seat, and she handed me the envelope. "I found this when I opened the shop this morning," she said. I opened the envelope to find a picture of me taken through my dorm room window. I felt like I was going to be sick. "That's not all," Meg said softly and cautiously. "This was with it." She held up a dried white rose. I felt the room begin to spin as I slumped off in the chair and onto the floor. When I came to, I was face to face with a police officer who was trying to help me up off the floor. It turns out Meg had been on the phone with the police as I came in. After I had a glass of water and tried to steady myself, the officer asked me a series of questions. Much to Meg's surprise, I told him I thought I knew who had left the photos. I told him about the man who had bought all of the single white roses and the awful feeling of foreboding I felt when he came into the shop. The officer was kind and understanding, but he told me that unless the guy was the only one who ever bought white roses, we would need more to go on before he could act on my suspicion. I told him I understood, and I did. That didn't keep me from being a nervous wreck for the entire next week. It upset Meg that I felt so insecure, and Tony was determined to catch whoever had scared me like this. So much so that he decided to spend the night at the shop the next Friday to see if he could catch the person who was doing this. He assumed that the person would come in on a Friday night, as he had the previous 2 times. Friday and Saturday came and went, and there was no photo and no rose. Meg was both frustrated and relieved, as she had been worried that the person might have tried to hurt Tony if he did show up. But we were no closer to finding proof of who was doing this. The following Monday, the security company installed the cameras at the front entrance of the shop. The next Friday and Saturday came and went, and there was still no photo, no rose. I couldn't even look the quiet guy up on the internet, as I had no name or information. He had always paid with cash, and he had never said much of anything. I started to doubt myself and think maybe it wasn't him. After all, he wasn't the only person who had bought the white roses from our shop. The next Friday, when I woke up to go to class, I opened my dorm room door to find a dried white rose and an envelope on the floor outside. I began to shake as I picked up the envelope. I didn't want to open it, but I had to know what was inside. It was 2 photos. One was of me talking to a male classmate named Jody at the library, and the other was of the back of Jody as he was leaving the library. I couldn't breathe. What did this mean? I felt as if I was going crazy. I panicked as I thought maybe that he was watching me right now. I began to tremble and cry. I dropped my phone twice as I tried to find Meg's contact. When I finally was able to call Meg, I had to repeat myself several times to tell her what happened, as she couldn't understand me through my tears. When she realized what I was telling her, she insisted that I come stay with her and Tony for a few days. I agreed right away and packed a couple bags. Tony and Meg came and picked me up from my dorm. For the next week, one of the two drove or walked me everywhere I went. When I had gone back to class, Jody had been absent. I asked around, and no one had heard from him. Escorted by Meg and Tony, I took the photos and the rose to the police station and requested a welfare check for Jody. The kind officer assured me that they would do a welfare check and check the CCTV cameras near the campus. 2 days later, I received a call from Officer Gregg. He said that they had checked on Jody in his dorm. Jody had skipped class due to having been assaulted outside the library. Someone had hit him in the back of the head with an object and kicked him in the ribs. While he was down, the assailant had run away before Jody could get a good look at him. Jody had staggered back to his dorm room and hadn't left in days out of fear. I asked Officer Gregg if they had found any notable CCTV footage. My blood ran cold when he replied, "Well, that's why we need you to come down to the station." I shivered and agreed to come in. Meg and Tony drove me to the station. When we entered Officer Gregg's office, he had a video paused on an iPad on his desk. He asked me to sit down, and I obliged. He asked if I was ready to look at the footage. I said yes, although my stomach churned at what I thought I might see. As he pressed play on the screen, I watched in horror as I saw the quiet guy from the shop kneeling under the window of the library with a Polaroid camera. The next camera angle showed the quiet guy following about 20 feet behind Jody as he walked around the corner, leaving the library. I felt sick. I started to sob. It took me 10 minutes to calm down enough to let them know that it was indeed the quiet guy who had creeped me out at the shop. We still had a major problem. With no name or information, we really had no way to find out who exactly this man was. Summer classes had come to an end, and I'd gone back to my parents' place 2 states away for the last 3 weeks before fall semester began. Officer Gregg told me that Jody had gone home as well and finished his last several assignments online. 2 weeks into my stay at my parents' house, Officer Gregg called me to let me know that they had found the quiet guy loitering outside the flower shop door the previous Friday night. They had placed an undercover officer outside the shop after the assault on Jody. The man whose name I discovered was Stephen, no last name for obvious reasons, was caught trying to place an envelope and a rose through the mail slot. Stephen was arrested for the assault on Jody and for stalking charges. I was told that he would be in jail for several months for the combined charges. I have been granted a restraining order. As much as I loved my job with Meg and Tony, and going to school at that university, I've chosen to transfer to a different school closer to home. I just don't think I can feel comfortable once Stephen gets out of jail if I'm anywhere near there.